Hey everyone, this is Nick, the host of the Tabletop podcast, and I have a little new website to tell you all about. It's shadowmain.com, SHADOMAIN.com, and it's a blog that is all about TTRPGs, covering playing, game mastering, creation, and streaming, and they have featured weekly articles, interviews, reviews, and news. It's a huge amount of stuff that they do over there, and it's all TTRPG. It's really awesome. You should check it out. Sign up for their email list to get a free monthly RPG Zine featuring new NPCs, magic items, monsters, and sneak peeks into their upcoming RPG game, Six Gun Doomsday, an adventure combining the Weird West, gothic horror, and post-apocalypse. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletopped, and we are doing another system review. So excited. We are diving deep into Mothership, but we'll get to that in just a second. First, let's introduce who's talking with me today. I'm Nick, your host, and at the table today, we have...
Franco.
Hi, first time speaker, long time listener. My name is Shade.
Okay.
Yes, Shade has never spoken before in his entire life.
You know what's really interesting that I've noticed, because me and Nick are the only ones that listen to the podcast, so Shade wouldn't know. But
I mean, I do.
Oh, okay. So I just realized that like we have been swapping Shade and Rio the past couple months.
It's because of the long-standing feud that we have.
Yeah, I just wanted to get it out there and put it out on the air.
I mean, it's not my fault that he has the questionable opinion, but it's fine.
Yeah, I can't wait until this feud develops into like some like Kendrick Drake beef style content creation.
Ooh, no, not Kendrick and Drake.
No,
No,
I can't wait to hear some awesome diss tracks. No, I'm not. I just realized, Shade, why you were like, no, not Kendrick and
not
Drake.
those two.
Content notwithstanding.
Kendrick and a different person.
Kendrick and a different person would be great.
Kendrick and J. Cole.
Yeah, there we go.
Shade is such a J. Cole. He would totally back right out. That's not a mean thing to say. J. Cole's very good.
I don't know if I know, but I don't know if
You don't think he would just back out?
He is nice. I guess he would just back out. Yeah. That's what I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'd just back out. But yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
I'm backing out right now.
And I'm pulling right on in. So let's get back to Mothership. So
you're going to land your ship right here.
This Mothership right here. For those who don't know what Mothership is a game system, TTRPG system that is sort of used for sci-fi horror, but can be used in like a very versatile set of ways. And we recently got a chance to sit down and play it during a one-shot, and we had a lot of fun, or at least I did. I was the one who ran it. So first, why don't we just kind of start with what Mothership is, and then we'll go into our impressions and what we liked and what we didn't like about it. So first of all, Mothership is a game by Tuesday Night Games. It's a 2D10 system. Or is it a 3D10 system?
It's like a D100, D10.
Yeah, so it's 2D10. Yeah.
It's its own thing. I think it's called the Panic Engine is sort of the mechanic that is based on. There's another game that is, I think it's based on it. I think it's Beecher's Bibles, maybe. I think it's based on that.
Yeah, and it's a pretty cool, like Franco said, it's a D100 system. So when you're rolling stats and everything, you're rolling, I think it's 3D10. You add them up and you add like 20 or something to get your core stats. They always, like 30 is normally like a pretty average score for a stat. And when you're using your stats in the game to make checks, you are rolling your D100 and you're trying to roll under that amount. So whereas D&D, high numbers are always good. In this game, low numbers are really good because you want to roll under your score because it's like what you're capable of doing. For example, if I was trying to like bust down a door and I had my body score that was like 40, let's say, which is really good. I roll 2d10 and it is a 55. Well, that means that I screwed up and I lose narrative power in that moment.
Wait, sorry,
and it goes back
slow down. You mean you roll a D100?
Yeah, 2d10, D100.
No, this is confusing because the system also uses 2d10.
It does,
like D10 plus D10 to. And that's not what that is, Nick.
Well, in the game it says roll 2d10, not 1d100. So in the manual, so that is what it is doing fundamentally. Franco, you're right. A d100 for these checks, and you also do use 2d10 for other things as well, like rolling your stats and stuff like that. So
sorry, and by that
agree,
you mean
can be confusing.
Yeah. So sometimes it's a d100, which is when you roll a D10 in the tens place and the D10s with the ones place. And that gets you your 100.
Yes. And one thing that I will get to later is that like there are 4 classes and then there's a whole like skill tree that will affect these rolls by giving you like plus 10s and stuff like that based on how many in the tech tree essentially you have decided to delve into. For example, there's like a hacking skill, but then the upgraded version of that is like AI, being able to like interface with AI, which gives you like a plus 20 on stuff. So this is all to say this is how checks are resolved. I think that this game really stood out for me because it is kind of like Franco style games where where violence is like highly discouraged, in that you're gonna get so screwed up if you just fight everything you see. And so in that way kind of forces you into that survival horror mode, and that's why I chose it. But I want to throw it to you guys, what you remember about the game, things that stood out to you as a system, because this was a little bit of a departure for us. Like Franco, like you said, this is a kind of a unique system in of itself. So what did you guys think?
Well, I also just want to say before going into that, that I also know Mothership from reading a lot of the modules for it. Like I've read Gradient Descent and I've read and I've run Haunting of Ipsilon 14, which is like a pamphlet adventure. I think one great thing about Mothership is that the stuff that is put out for it is quite good. Like Gradient Descent is incredible. It's like this mega dungeon that's like run by an AI. Ipsilon 14 is very fun. I ran it for a group using a different system, so it's not strictly, I can't strictly say like that's part of the Mothership review thing, but the pamphlet that was written for Mothership was quite good. It's just 6 panels and then you can just run things and all that, and it has like audio files that go along with it. It's well worth the cost of it, which is probably not that high. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but I think one thing is that this game seems very well loved by both the community and the creators, because they keep putting out stuff like that. Like you said, Franco, I think like you said, there's 6-ish adventures that are currently published, and on their website they have a couple more. There's a sort of like DMG and also a player guide, and then there's like a bunch of bonus stuff outside of that, including 1-page rules if you just wanted to sit down and start up. But yes, I agree that was like another reason where it sort of felt like Morkborg in a way, where it's like, this must be good because it's so well supported. Yeah, that's true.
It's funny you mentioned Morkborg, because I literally 2 weeks maybe before we played the Mothership, I had a chance to try out Alien RPG, which is by Free League. Yeah, I would agree. It definitely has a Morkborg feel. The Alien RPG that I played, which was ran by enemy of the podcast, friend of the podcast, Tim. It was a lot of fun. I think honestly the crossover or the overlay between the two games was similar enough to me that I could just pick up either of them and go, yep, I'm playing Alien.
Wait, you mean Alien and Mothership?
And Mothership, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. They were very similar.
Like the feel of it, or the actual... Okay,
they definitely share a lot of
mechanics.
influence when it comes to atmosphere and like what feeling they're trying to evoke as well. So that probably also helps.
I would say mechanically, Mothership was. I feel like there was some similarity in mechanics. I actually felt the Alien RPG was a little tighter to me mechanically.
Interesting.
Ooh, I wonder what you mean by that.
So, Mothership, I think it came down to things like what we were discussing earlier of like, am I rolling 2d10 or rolling a d100, which is a fine distinction. But with the Alien RPG, it was just d6s, and it was a massive pool of d6s. I found the panic tables to be a little more streamlined in Alien RPG.
But they both have a panic mechanic.
They do. They both
That's
have
cool.
a panic mechanic.
Which, let me say, I really enjoyed.
Yes, I think the panic mechanic for either of them, and again, this is me saying, having played both, I would gladly play either of them. Both good TTRPGs. I don't think that the differences are so great. Like, if you're looking for something that is evocative of the dread of deep space and monsters that you're not really equipped to contend with realistically, and also more of a narrative style of play, or cinematic style of play. Either of these is going to serve you very well. But yeah, I think, and also, of course, we should acknowledge, Nick, that you did do a modification of this. I
totally did. Yeah,
it was a bit of a hack.
completely bastardized it. I took for the listener. There's a board game called Nemesis, which is also an alien inspired kind of deep space horror game. But it is a board game. And I was like, well, this is a fully functioning map of a ship. And I also added some mechanics in there, like when people moved through rooms, they would generate noise. And if they generate too much noise within certain areas, it would attract things to them. So I did that. And then basically I had stuff like doors that they could unlock and lock, and had some like mechanics that I had thrown in from the board game. But the way we resolved everything was through the TTRPG rules. Yeah. So it, like you said, Shade, I think that it's like mixed. Like maybe we didn't get an entirely clean experience of it in that way, but
right. I don't know that I would argue it was, because they meshed well together. And
yeah, I thought, Nick, what rules did you replace using Nemesis? Like using that board game, like what rules because I haven't read Mothership.
Sure.
And we've only played it, and I've read like the quick start stuff or whatever, but like from a GM perspective, like what is the stuff that you had to replace?
Yeah. So the only thing that I sort of replaced or added in was the noise mechanic and the goals of your game, like what you guys wanted to do,
objectives. Yeah. Which I think is like, that's okay. So based on that, it sounds like we had a pretty direct experience of what Mothership might play like, because I think like one of the things that was difficult for me to feel out, because I think something that I noted was that like we did get trapped a lot in deadly situations where there was no recourse really. Yeah. And I felt sometimes limited by the space and like the options in the space. And I think it was sometimes I wasn't sure if it was like, is this a lack of my creativity right now, or is this because I feel constrained by the sort of little board game map that we had?
Yeah, it would definitely be the latter, in that it was basically I had used the board game to serve as the map that you guys were doing. When you discovered places on the map, that's all board game stuff. Being able to like check and see whether the ship was like piloting towards a certain area, that's also in the board game. Checking the engines was also part of the board game. So basically all of the objectives that you guys wanted to do.
I think that doesn't seem like it changes the game very much, right?
Yeah.
I think I think the sort of the physical space is what I feel like. I'm curious what would be different if we ran something else that wasn't set on such a strict map. And it wasn't like a grid or anything. I don't want people to think that. But it was basically like every room was its own thing and every room was connected in kind of a predictable way, but we revealed the rooms as we went along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just the sort of the space was restricting because all of our first characters died. And then we basically all had to wake back up. And literally like we had to awaken new characters that were in cryo sleep, right? And then try to figure out our way out of this. And
honestly,
think,
if I were to run it again, I would end it at where you all died because thematically that was great.
I think it worked really well, and I think that's something that I think I mentioned while we were playing that too. I ran something I was playtesting for Sean, who was also one of our players in this Mothership game, and it was like a level 0 style type of like what is it called? Like Dungeon Crawl Classics does this, but it's like I wish I could remember what it's called.
A meat grinder.
I guess a meat grinder, but it's like the sort of thing where you like you start with like 4 characters.
Yeah, like Tomb of Annihilation or something.
Tomb of
Horrors. It's like a AD&D module that Tomb of Annihilation was based on, but it's basically like you prod something with a thing.
I don't
and rocks
think
fall and you die.
No, Tomb of Horrors isn't really. It wasn't designed like that. Like it was designed for like tournament play to like challenge players and stuff in like a really dickish way. That's what Tomb of Horrors was written for. I don't think it was written as like a DCC style meat grinder. I don't think it was written for that. But yeah, like Dungeon Crawl Classics does this thing where they basically you grab like a bunch of level 0 characters, which are basically just like villagers, and then anyway, in this game that I ran for Sean, all of them died. All 12 characters died. And then they were like, okay, we got to go again. Let's do it again. Let's get more characters. Because it was basically like they were in a nunnery and the nunnery was like going to hell or something. And so it was basically like, okay, the 4 of you are now like nuns that were hiding under the floorboards or whatever, which is like was one of the things that I had thought of was like, okay, like if you lose a character, like you can, come out of like hiding or something like that and be like, oh, what's going on? But they were adamant about beating the monster at the end. I think that's kind of what happened to us too, which is we're like, no, we were so close.
We were very close.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to the type of game that you use this system for. Like it is set up so that you can have campaigns and you do long-term things, but like the stress and panic mechanics, like there is stuff in there where you're just like you become psychotic, like you have seen into the secrets of the universe and it has completely broken you, and like how do you play that after that game? Like I'm not entirely sure. And there are things like you have a heart attack and you're just instantly dead, so it's not like a game where it's saying like you're gonna live forever.
I think there's a problem that I have with some games like this. Karen has this, and I guess probably Into the Odd also has these, like the Scars table, and then like the panic table and stuff. I sort of like resist when games try to put really prescriptive like results on stuff. So like the panic table, right? It's like a set. How many options is it? Is like 20?
It's like basically you roll and it has things from 2 to 30, so I think that there's like 15
modifiers,
options totally.
Can you read one of the options?
Yeah, sure. So one of them is paranoid. For the next 1d10 days, whenever a character joins your group, even if they only left for a short period of time, make a fear save or gain 1 stress.
Yeah, like there's stuff like that where it feels really prescriptive about like what happens when you hit this point, right? When you're like, okay, I'm going to panic. And I guess we didn't explain how panic works, but if you want to explain that real quick, because I just feel like it's such a core part of the of the game.
Yeah, so stress is something that you accumulate throughout your time playing the game. You're going to accumulate it very quickly. So essentially, it is anytime you fail one of your core saves, which is sanity, fear, body, or armor, you gain a stress. but also there are times that you can gain stress just like that. It's sort of out of your control. Like if you are on a ship and it gets attacked by another ship or something, and the ship maintains like some like big damage, then it is, or sustains some big damage, then everyone on board feels that something bad is happening to the ship and starts to get stressed about it. So you gain stress there too. But there's also like going 24 hours without rest, getting knocked unconscious, seeing a monster for the first time can give you stress. Going out without food or water, near misses with like big things in space like asteroids. And then there's stuff that's like specific to each character class. Like if you're with a Marine character, which is one of the classes, and they start to panic, which means they failed a stress save, then everyone else starts to panic too and gain stress because they're like, oh fuck, this guy like with the biggest gun is scared. So there's like a lot of ways to gain stress. And then panic is something that happens as you accumulate stress. You will be doing what's called a stress check. So you'll roll 2d10, not a d100. Important to make that clear. And if you roll over your current stress, you don't panic and you relieve a stress. But if you roll under or equal to, you basically have a panic attack. And that is when you roll on that panic table to gain some sort of negative effects that you will then use to role play for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, and so like that sort of last bit where there is like this sort of prescribed limited list of things that definitely happen to you. Like only this set of things happens to you when this triggers, right? Like I don't know. I've always had kind of a problem with that. I just feel like it's very specific and prescriptive and stuff. I don't know what you guys might think about it.
I don't know. I think that this kind of comes down to because I know you're not a fan of like alignment, for example.
Yeah.
And to me, those are guide rails, not what's the word I want? No, actually, not. Sorry, they're not guidelines. Yeah, sorry. I was like, I know I'm saying this wrong. Guidelines, not guide rails. Like you could pass over a guideline, you know, and change lanes a little bit, but you're still going the same direction.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't mind it too much because I mean, especially with. I mean, a good example of this. So I think one of the things that, and it occurs to me, it actually may have been in some respects the board game that made this feel even more like the Alien RPG to me.
Yeah.
Because you gave us specific goals, and each person in the Alien RPG has like a goal. So it felt very similar in that respect. On the second character, I think I drew something to the effect of like, it was essentially like the aliens are perfect. Like everything needs to die except the aliens.
Right.
That is not a direction I would have naturally gone towards. And, you know, is that prescriptive? Obviously it's not on the panic table, but it's kind of akin to it. Yeah, it is. But at the same time, it gave me a different North Star to look at. I
get what you mean, but that feels like something that happens like maybe not at character creation, but sort of at like that's a part of your character, right? Versus it being like, this is an effect that happens to you and you're just limited to these, like this list of 29. Right. I think that's kind of what feels weird to me. Like, I feel like if it's something like at character creation like that, I'm really cool with randomize. I love randomizing that type of stuff. But I think like, I don't know. I guess it's there's no like good reason for it, but there's just something that like I don't quite like about it.
I think my feelings on this are mixed. Some of the things on the table are positive, like an adrenaline rush, and you get advantage on like physical things of trying to escape, or like laser focus, like you're panicking and so you have focused in and you're trying to get to your goal and all that stuff. This all works really well for me. I love when a game kind of tells me this kind of stuff. But where I start to agree with Franco is like, if I were to run this in a campaign, like in a one shot, I love this shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah.
It varies the experience. It allows the GM to start, kind of mixing it up. It informs their storytelling. It informs the person playing the character who, in a one shot, you really don't have a whole lot of time to sink into who that person is. You're kind of playing for 4 hours and then it's done. Not a whole lot of time to develop nuance. This kind of forces nuance. However, I think that the illusion breaks. And Franco, I don't know if this is what you're talking about as well. Anytime you roll the same thing again, it just like the illusion is shattered and you're like, oh, this is a game, this is a table, and I've rolled the same number twice. That is where it breaks down for me. So in a longer term campaign, I think that I would probably have the panic effect change to something like the GM, like something a little bit more like Powered by the Apocalypse, where the GM could just take it and then say like, this is something that starts happening, and give them narrative power over the moment.
I would say even like maybe just doing, if you fail the check but you roll like, well, it's like a, like you said, like the sort of the positive ones are on the lower end.
Yeah.
Like if you roll on like the positive end, then it's sort of like, oh, like let me tell you how this kind of plays out. But I don't know. I like it's because then, yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know how I feel about it's sort of like how I feel about sanity as a mechanic, like a sanity mechanics. I like the panic mechanic in Cairn that is just kind of like you go to zero guard, meaning you're not on your guard anymore. And then I forget what the other effect is, but it's just kind of like, okay, this is like a simple like mechanical change to your character that you can also role play, versus like something as specific as you were saying, where like I like those first two though. Like I like, laser focus and your whatever, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's just like the type of thing, and I don't know how hard for you was it to give out stress, like to know when to give out stress?
Honestly, it because I was running it for the first time, it was a little hard in that I wasn't an expert at like doling it out in the right way. Mm-hmm. The game gives you infinite opportunities to give stress, and it can be pretty severe. Like you can play it in such a way, like the rules as written, you could play it in such a way that when you fail, you have to roll 1d10, and whatever you roll, that's how much stress you gain.
Yeah,
which is quite severe. If you roll a 10, that's like pretty bad.
Right.
So I think that the stress mechanic is meant for it's meant for atmospheric purposes and to guide the player. I do agree that it would take some messing with to get used to and to use it in a way that was sustainable, I think. And I definitely was not there when we were GMing. I think it would take me probably like 4 or 5 sessions to try to start getting like, okay, this is the feel. This is when I should really be doling it out. And here's where I can just kind of say, yeah, one stress or whatever.
I don't know. Like one thing I do like about panic tables personally is, I mean, I like to think that I know how I'm going to react when stressed, but I also know that sometimes my stress comes out in a way that I wasn't expecting.
That makes sense.
And that is kind of a fun thing. I do think that I think the system has this, and if I was in a longer campaign with it, like I agree 100% with your sentiments, Nick, for one shots, holy hell, that kind of stuff is great. For longer campaigns, it does get a little bit. I agree with Franco that that's better at maybe the start, or it's like a wild magic table, or I don't know. Like there's specific things that you are consciously buying into to a level.
If I was to do a long-term game, I think that would be really fun for each arc to give each player the chance of saying like, okay, write me a panic table. Like how would your character react from the best possible way under stress, like a net positive benefit, all the way to like, maybe heart attack is always on there, like instant death just because it's scary, but like make your own table so that your character feels, like still like yourself, and it doesn't feel like you're that character dissonance will happen less because you've written this. So it feels more like something that you can sort of like think your character would do. And then between each arc, you could rewrite those so that your character grows along with your played experience. And maybe that would also help solve what Franco was talking about of like, you know, a set table that never changes. And this is always going to be how my character reacts randomly or something. It was just like an idea. I think that this mechanic, there's a lot of room to homebrew within as well. But Shade, you were talking and I interrupted. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
So all I was going to say is a similar kind of idea to kind of help with a long running campaign is I almost feel like if you took the basic table and gave players a chance to, I don't really have a good way of explaining this other than saying like they can earn like feats so that certain types of stressors or panic results they really have more narrative control over, or just like can you know, miss me with that shit on it entirely. Like, you know, maybe one of the stressors is I don't know. I don't have a good example. I don't have the table in front of me, but maybe one of the stressors is they lose the ability to speak clearly.
Yeah. Actually, that is one of them.
Okay. I figured it must be, right? For 1d10 hours. Instead, maybe that goes down to like a D4 or, you know, like you can kind of grow. You never lose your words. That might be something that's interesting. But at that point, you're hacking the system, which I will say, as standing rule, if you are playing a TTRPG and you are not hacking the system, do yourself the favor and go ahead and hack it. Like it's no TTRPG is pure perfection. You're always going to put your own twist on there, and it's always going to be way better because you did.
Yeah. And I will say that like one of the things that I think is really cool about this panic table, and I would be curious to hear how Alien does this, is that a lot of these also give stress to people around you, which I really like. Like, one of them is called like nervous twitch, and it's basically everyone who sees you start developing this twitch is like, what the fuck is up with this guy? Like something is wrong, and so they get stressed out about that too. You know what I mean?
So Alien definitely had something sort of similar. Like I remember the android, because they of course also have an android, just can't get stressed.
Yeah.
Period. Which is, I think, maybe the same way for Mothership.
This one, the android can panic.
Okay,
but it's slightly different. But basically, it still interacts with the system, but not in quite the same way as like a human.
Maybe it also interacted with the panic table. I don't recall. But the panic stuff was interesting because it resulted in like secondary roles and kind of just was like, okay, I've triggered panic. Now I need to see if I actually succumb to the panic, which I think is kind of similar to Mothership.
Yeah.
But I never felt like in either system really like, oh no, like this is ruining my experience.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Personally.
Why don't we head to break? And on the way back from break, we can kind of talk about both of your experiences playing. I'll talk a little bit about GMing, and we can talk about some of the other mechanics like the skill trees and all that kind of thing. But we'll talk about all of that right after this.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletop and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletop. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today.
Welcome back to Tabletop, everyone. Today we're talking about Mothership. Before the break, we were kind of talking about the basic idea of the system, how it works, and then also really deep diving into the stress and panic tables, which is one of the more defining things I think about this system. Why don't we start real quick, Shade and Franco, with the skills, and then we'll move on from there. So the skill tree is part of the character creation. And it was part of it where you essentially, how you create a character is you pick a class. There's 4 of them, so nothing too, like, you're not going to be paralyzed by choice there. But then you roll all of your stats with, I looked it up, it's actually 60-10. So you get 60-10, and then 30 is your average there. And then after that, you get sort of like skill points to dump into this skill tree that will help you by adding percentages to every role that it fits with. For example, there's stuff like linguistics, biology, more advanced things like surgery, xenology, things like that. And all of these will affect any role that is in that genre. So, for example, like archaeology is one of them. That means any role, and they define these, that involves ancient cultures and their artifacts, you just get a straight bonus on, which is super helpful when you're trying to do stuff. And it also is really cool because you can like make a character that feels very good at specific things. So like if you want to make a Marine that just feels like a tough dude, there's stuff in there that's like heavy machinery and first aid and, you know, firearms, and all of that is going to just make your dude feel like a badass that can run around a ship with a gun and go toe to toe with aliens. But if you're also like, I want a Marine that's like, you know, maybe a new recruit, but before this was a scientist, there's stuff that does that too. So Shade, I want to kind of jump in and talk to you about this. When you were making a character, what do you think of that process? And did the skill tree kind of work that way for you? Did you like the skill tree? Because that's the main function of how you level up and how you get better as a character. So like, what did you think about that? So
for me, the skill tree provoked a lot of kind of excitement in, I would love to be skilled in this thing. I wonder how that would come up. You know, like there was mathematics based kind of stuff, and I was just like, oh man, I really love the idea of using math and being able to. And we did do that at least once in the game where I want to say it was maybe you, Franco. You needed to you needed to quietly during an anti-grav move, like move through an area without alerting anyone and stealthily do it, because there's no stealth in the game. That's a very core principle here. And we rolled essentially how you kind of did the calculations to propel yourself in this anti-grav situation. And that felt neat. As far as, you know, I mean, we didn't technically level up, so I can't really speak too much to the progression. I definitely would have been interested in progressing more, and I think that there were some interesting skills there. But I guess I also felt like there was a certain level of, it's difficult to determine when such skills should be used. Yeah, that's the thing that I was, as a GM, it's hard to keep track of all of that stuff, especially in a one shot. It would really depend on your, like, it would absolutely rely on your players saying like, hey, I'm trained in this. I would like to use this type of skill to do this in this specific way. Because if you're relying on like the GM and it's a one shot to remember all that, it's just not gonna, it didn't work out as well, because you guys all had various skills and you also went through characters, so you had different sets of skills too. And so I would say that in that way it doesn't hold up as well as I would like. However, in a longer term campaign, I could see that being like, as a GM, like if I have a character that went down the tech tree
and has done, let's see, one of them is biology goes into genetics that goes into xenobiology. Like maybe I make that a core part of a campaign or a session that I'm going to run, where like you open up a ship and you find, xeno bodies all littered around, and you have to figure out what killed them or like how they died. And that character can, roll with crazy amounts of bonuses because they are so well trained in that. And like that is really cool. And I think in a longer form game that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I would agree generally that in a one-shot setting, it doesn't really do what I would want it to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've had some discussions about skills in general and why they are or are not valuable. And I know, that I'm more on the side of I actually usually like skills in a system. It definitely would have to be, I think a little more universal. Although, come to think of it, and maybe I'm wrong here, you could call for like a something that if you don't have expertise or whatever it was in something, you could still call for that roll, right? Like
you could still roll, yeah. Basically,
okay.
These are just added bonuses. So like and to go to your universality sort of things, the way that they've kind of done it is that the first level is incredibly broad, like linguistics, biology, zero gravity. Like these are very broad categories. But by the time you get to like the master level, which is the end of the tech tree, it's stuff like a little bit more specific, like hyperspace, which is a little bit more of a niche. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or like weapon specialization, and you choose a specific weapon that you're very specialized in. Or, Xeno. This one says Xeno-ostracism, which is cool. It's basically like xenotheology. Like that's incredibly niche. But it gives you a 20% bonus on those checks. So it also kind of funnels.
I don't know. Maybe then I would say I think I'm more okay with it than I may have realized. For some reason, I was thinking it was more like you can only roll if you have an ability point, a tech point in it. But if you can roll without the proficiency, then yeah, I like it. I like that. I am a fan of skill trees. So
yeah, one of the rules in this book that I actually really enjoy is basically it says the assumption should be that your players and the characters that they are running are very capable. Like no matter what they're doing, they're all capable enough to be in space. So, the base level training that an astronaut has to go into space, like they all at least have that, I guess. Like and that's kind of up to the GM and the players when they decide what kind of game they want to play. But yeah, it's not like because in D&D, isn't there a thing where if you're not proficient in a skill, like it's like you're not supposed to roll it or something? No, I've had that before. Maybe it was
I know. There's been certain, in particular, sometimes it'll be a thing where you can't help. Like, so there's a table rule that people might be like, well, you can't use the help action on this because you're not proficient in it. Which I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can hold a wound close.
I have a stapler.
I have so I am certainly not an athlete, but I know how to run, and I can catch something presumably. So I don't know. Yeah, I would say it was a good system, and it definitely inspired a lot of thought. For me. And it made me want to go, okay, hey, I want to play further on. And I think that's one of the big things about any kind of skill system. So few like D&D games get to higher tiers of play, but so many people theory craft all the way up to level 20. It's because you like that idea of one day I can grow up to be this. That's exciting. And I think that particular set of tech tree really inspired that for me. I really wanted to know what to do with hyperspace. Yeah, I mean, I saw that on there. I went, oh yeah, absolutely. I would go towards hyperspace. Please, give it to me now.
Yeah, and then why don't we talk really briefly about combat, which I think is... So this game basically says in the rule book, don't get into combat with things that you don't know. like if you think that it's like down to, can I handle like fighting with a wolf or a rabid dog? This system, like D&D, is like, yes, you can, with the sheer force of will and just like your instinct to survive, you'll be okay. This game takes the opposite view and is like, you don't even know, like, if that dog is sick. You don't know if that dog, how hungry that dog is. You don't know how determined that dog is to like attack you. And it said, you're going to get really messed up by the dog. And I think that is something that I really like in this specific this system, because it is supposed to be a horror game. And a lot of times it basically says up top, hey, you should try to avoid fighting with monsters as much as possible. You should hide from them. You should run away from them. You should set traps so that you can escape from them. But like running in somewhere with your fists and you're like going to punch out, this crazy alien that's like scuttling on the walls is not a good idea, which I think is really great for a horror game, because that's, what your core mechanic in a lot of games when it comes to horror is the feeling of powerlessness when fighting or opposing a foe with like martial strength. Right. But what did you guys feel about that when it came to fighting in this game? Because it's basically just opposed checks. Like the alien rolls, you roll. If you roll better than the alien, then you land an attack. If the alien rolls better than you, it screws you up a little bit. So what did you guys feel about that? How did it work out for you?
This is tricky because I would say the Alien RPG also felt this way to an extent, and it's hard because, especially in a game that doesn't have a stealth mechanic built in, I will say.
Did you guys talk about that already? Sorry, I was gone.
We kind of briefly talked about it, and we also talked about how much you love skill checks in general. That you're a huge advocate.
Yeah, we talked about the skill tree. Franco had to step away for a second, but we talked about the skill tree and how that's your main like way to customize your character.
I like the skill tree in this game. I don't really like how skills work in any other game, because the skill is the skill tree is just like it might as well not even exist as far as I'm concerned. Because of how it works. Because it's just like, oh, you're good at hacking. It's like, great. I want to be better at hacking. It's like, great. Now you're better at hacking. You have or I want to specialize in something, whatever. It's like, great, that works, fine, why not?
I don't know. You've just described every skill tree I've ever encountered.
No, but like, think about like perception. Like, okay, I'm gonna whatever. Like, I think it's like 5e's like menu of skills.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like to roll if you don't need to roll. Like if I like, I don't like to, like if you're like, oh, I'm good at hacking. It's like, great, roll to hack, and it's like. So that part of it I don't like. I like the tree. I don't like having to make the checks. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I like the tree that is presented in Mothership. I don't really care about the checks that are involved. Right.
Well, as far as combat goes, though, in both Alien RPG and Mothership, I kind of felt like combat, like we died, obviously. But I don't know. I never feel like I should win against a xenomorph.
Yeah.
Period. Like there's got to be mountains of setup for that to happen, and I can safely report that in both Alien RPG and Mothership, when I played, I punched and killed at least one personally. Not punch, but like hit it with a wrench or something. And sure, that could happen, but it kind of takes away from it, undercuts the deadly aspect. Just the idea that there is any combats.
That's interesting.
Go ahead, Franco.
I can definitely see that. I think I agree with you. I think the way that it worked in this game, it just felt like there were a lot of monsters. And
that was also me.
I think when we actually fought and won, it felt like it made sense. And then every time that we fought, like when we killed like a full xenomorph, like that was nuts. Like I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's good. And then, we just kind of kept going. I think I agree with you there, Shade, with that particular part. As far as like the actual way to fight, it felt very OSR-y to me, like where it's like just okay, now you go and then boom, and then you're good, you roll, and then sometimes you hit and sometimes I don't like to hit rolls and stuff like that. And then this game, there kind of is that, isn't there?
It's just contested. So basically the monster will roll, and if you roll better than the monster, then it's just like who ends up with the upper hand in this like weird little encounter you have, and the damage will be dealt accordingly.
And damage is always dealt. Is that right? Is that how it works?
Yes, damage is always dealt.
Yeah, either one or the other.
Yeah, or just like something that I do as a house rule for monsters usually in this type of thing is like either they will hurt you or they will disadvantage you in a major way. Like at one point, the alien had won a roll, and instead of like really fucking someone up, I just had it melt the gun, so it doesn't. You can't have the gun anymore. But I would say that this game. I also think that this is sort of like a philosophical thing when you're making a game is what pillar of gameplay are you focusing on? This game very much does not focus on combat. It's like, who goes first? Whoever wants to go first. And like, are you surprised? Great. Then this happens. And it's you're contesting roles, and like, how does cover work? If you think that you have cover, then you have advantage or something. It's very, just kind of brush it aside because that is not the core tenet of the game they want you to focus on.
Is that a little bit, did it feel more like a PBTA game in that way?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when I was doing it with you guys, like it did feel a little bit more like a PBTA game. But healing and removing stress is so limited in this game as well.
Right.
It's really trying to say like, do not fight, don't do it. So it's really focusing on the other pillars of gameplay to try to force a different feeling from a game. And also to, I think, ratchet up the fear so that if you do encounter something, it feels much more existential rather than like, oh, I have to grind through this mound of, gobloids to get to the next room of whatever it is. It's not a game where I would be making a map to have like crazy fights. It would be more like, hey, this is the situation you're in. How are you going to use your ingenuity and skills to get out of that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of tricky sometimes in a TTRPG because, I mean, first and foremost, for better or worse, in a game setting, a lot of immediate mindset is just, I'll fight it. Like, it's when you're removed from the reality of a situation, you don't have the same, fight, flight, freeze responses, or was the last one fawn, and you really just kind of stick to the fight. I don't know if, like, there were a couple moments where we did run and it felt good. Like, okay, yeah, this is the right thing to do. We're making the run. But then there are other moments where you are just 100% cornered, and
and honestly, that's how you guys died the first time, was that like a previous conflict had set a room on fire and it was still fully on fire, and one of like the gangways to another room had melted away from acid, and there was just like an alien in the room with like the last surviving person, and it was like starting to walk closer, and it was sort of like, the person against the wall firing the pistol, and then the pistol just starts clicking, and then the alien eats you, kind of thing.
Hey, so I fell to my death instead. I jumped. I tried to make that jump. I tried to make that jump, and then I just fell to my death. I thought, I don't know. It was just very, I didn't mind. I think that's kind of what I mean about the map is like, I felt so cornered And I don't know if that was also because of like the noise mechanic that you had introduced to.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, honestly, like it totally fits. Like the noise mechanic totally fits in like an OSR game. Like that is like that feels good to me. Like it totally makes sense as like a thing that you would include in a game, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think it was that. I do think it was just like there were so many situations where we really did just have to fight, and I didn't feel bad that we died.
No.
It was just sort of like, I think that I felt bad anytime we needed to fight.
Yeah.
Like it felt wrong.
I think that if having done this again, I want to talk a little bit about how I feel as the person who GM'd, and then I want to throw it to how you guys felt about the game, if you had fun, like how you felt as a player going through it. If I were to do it again, I was trying to use all of the pieces of the board game. So like I had like face hugger ones that didn't really do any damage, but it like may have infected you if it attacked you. And then I would give out these little cards from the board game, and you had to go to a room to see if the card said that you were infected or not. Yeah. All of that stuff. If I removed it all, I would probably just have one monster chasing you guys around. And then that also kind of encourages you to split up a little bit and have a little bit more of a horror experience, because then it can't be with all three of you at once.
I would echo that. I had a really great time overall. I think, and this is something that I think is true of the Alien franchise, anytime there's more than, I'll say 3. I'll give them 3. Yeah. Like anytime there's more than 3 Xenos, which includes the little face huggers, game over, man. Yeah. It's game over. Like,
nice.
Thank you.
Game over, man.
But no, seriously, like, you know, I love Aliens. Alien is probably my preferred of the two. Yeah. But Aliens almost feels fucking ridiculous for a minute, because they do come in there and they're just like just shooting up everything. And it's like, oh wow, it does feel like they might be able to just succeed against this. And that just continues through that series as you watch it, where it's just like, okay, I mean, if you got some people with some guns and some flamethrowers, no big deal. Like it's inconvenient, but it's just about as bad if you had like a pack of wolves or bears coming at you. Like, I mean, you know, that's the way it begins to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys talk about stealth yet?
A little bit, not much.
We talked about it sort of that it doesn't exist.
And I mentioned how you had to like you were doing like a non-stealth roll by rolling a skill check to see if you could math out how to propel yourself through a room that one time. I thought that was pretty
zero
neat.
grav.
Yeah, I think that worked fine. I think the lack of stealth mechanic, I think I had mentioned that while we were playing, because I sort of told you like, hey, don't there's no stealth that's like on purpose. It's just basically like the game there's a Brandon Lee Mulligan said that about like how he likes 5e because there are rules for combat and there's no rules for like role playing and RP and stuff, when he was like told about like, oh, there's like story games and you can do like narrative stuff and blah blah blah, and he's like, well, like there's no rules for that. Yeah. And so I can just do what I want. And so like if there's no rules for stealth, it sort of like hangs the hat on stealth as being the most important thing, because it is like you're in a horror situation. Like it's like when you get to roll a die, then you don't have to think about the actual thing that's happening. You just like completely abstract away a stealth roll.
That's what I love any game that makes the player have to say, okay, if I'm going to try to like find something and I'm going to try to hide myself under it. Or like when you were there and you were like, okay, well, it's zero gravity. I could probably get through this room without generating any noise and attracting any sort of attention if I can like math this trajectory out. And then that felt really interesting and cool. Yeah. So I would agree that like, I like that it doesn't have a stealth roll, because it's saying it's important enough that we want to leave it to the players to be able to do whatever they want with it.
I think it's really like, you know, in a lot of games, the question the GM says is, what do you do? And I think there's another question under that, which is like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the creativity comes in from the player. And it's like, well, how are you doing that? And if the how is I'm going to roll perception, like that's so fucking boring.
Right. But, and see, this is one of the other things that
or I'm going to roll stealth,
Sure.
Yeah.
But I will say sometimes you don't have the spoons to be able to be creative in that moment, or maybe just don't have the resources. You want to get there.
What do you mean by the spoons? I'm confused.
Sorry, that's an expression. It means that you don't have maybe the mental capacity to be creative in a moment, or you're not feeling very creative in this moment, or any number of ways to put this. Being able to say, like, I would like to persuade the king to give me their crown. I mean, the DM can just say, well, no, there's no circumstance in which that will happen. You are welcome to say this, and I will tell you that the king will laugh in your face. Or maybe there is a circumstance for some reason that will happen, and the DM will say, okay, cool. How do you say this? And the player can simply say, I don't actually know how I would make that, but I've gotten the cues from what we've discussed here that there's a chance that this could happen. Can I just roll for it?
What if there's a mechanic?
I do think that this is a good point, because I think we've talked about this before. Maybe I heard this in another group of people talking about it. But for example, like you were talking about Shade, and I'm just going to do a slightly different example because I really like it, where it's if a character wants to, in a D&D setting, be the face of the party, be a paladin or whatever, but is a socially anxious, maybe isn't very comfortable with like the charisma, like whatever that means. Like, how do you be this ultra charismatic party leader, or like this really authoritative party leader, if you don't feel like you know how to do that in real life, and you just don't know how to go about it? And so the role allows sometimes for you to just say, I'm just going to attempt this, like, and then the GM can take up the slack and say, well, you say directly to the guard, I want in on this gate. He feels something coming off of you, the urgency of your mission, and just steps aside. Like there is a place for that, but I get what both of you are saying.
No, I just mean, like, I think that's still, I think you can still do that without having to roll. If you don't have a mechanic built into the game, it's like you can still do that, because the how doesn't have to be like, okay, now what do I do? It's the how could be like, okay, like I want to, like I don't really like the idea that, you have to perfectly role play that charisma, right? Like you don't have to do that. You don't have to perfectly. I think if you just say like, I think if you can't answer the how, I think you can try to answer the what, and then like, what do you want this outcome to be? And no, yeah. So a player of mine, Paul, there was a situation where they basically were just not. They were talking to someone that they suspected of doing something, like, oh, I think I suspect them of doing this, and he just role played that conversation, and I was like, this is coming off like kind of like threatening a little bit. And so that person took a drastic action to, sort of lull them into a false sense of security, and then try to set the building they were in on fire. It was like, oh, wait for me in this house. And then, they saw her like leave and then come back with a bunch of her soldiers, her bodyguards, and then also was instructing those bodyguards to set the house on fire. And I think like it sort of, I think in retrospect, I maybe would have stopped him from role playing it as much, and maybe just been like, what is the tactic that you want to take here? Do you want to be persuasive? Do you want to be deceptive? Do you want to be argumentative? Do you want to be aggressive? Like, are you trying to intimidate her into like getting this? Like, what is the objective that you want? And then what kind of tactic do you want to take? Like, even if you're socially inept or something, or whatever, like you don't have the social skills you think to be able to do something like that, the conversation could be something like, hey, like what's, like the question is always thrown back. It's just like, how do you want to convince them to do this thing? And it's like, well, I'm not sure, like, what could I do? And it's like, okay, here's some tactics. Here's a little laundry list of things that you might be able to do. And then, they can sort of decide on which tactic feels right to them, even if it's like the player thinks that that's the best tactic, or if the character thinks that's the best tactic, or some mixture of the two. Because I don't know. I mean, I think the thing that you were saying, Shade, about not having sort of like the mental energy at that particular moment to not feel creative enough and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of like, well, I mean, that happens all the time, and
Sure.
and it's not the worst thing in the world to fail at being able to raise up the guard to let you through.
Also, this is going a little long and not quite what we are talking about when it comes to this specific episode. Maybe we should definitely talk about it in a future one.
Sure. I think that it was all couched in the, we don't have a stealth check.
Yeah.
So
philosophy of stealth checks.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are going a little long, and Shade, I know you have to run to something. So why don't we just get some just general opinions from both of you as from the player side? I've already kind of talked about from a GM side. So from the player side, what do you guys think about the system? Would you recommend it? And then we'll close out.
I think it was okay. I think I would recommend it if people want to try it out. I think a lot of the supplements and pamphlets and games that they have for it are really cool. Like I said, like Radiant Descent and Haunting on Epsilon 14 looked great. Like I ran Epsilon 14. I ran it with Meteor, which is a Cairn hack of Mothership, and has I think a slightly better way of handling panic that I kind of enjoyed. And so I would check that one out, and I would check out the stuff from like that is published by Tuesday Night Games. And I think you can try Mothership. I think it just kind of wasn't for me. I don't know why. Like D100 didn't feel that good to me. Like skills, don't really like skills. I thought stress was fine. So all in all, like I don't know. I think it was okay. I would rather probably play a different game, but I would play it again. But yeah, not an enthusiastic endorsement for me, but no shade on the guy. I think Sean McCoy is brilliant, but it's just I don't know if it's for me, basically.
Cool. And what about you, Shade?
Yep. I would play it again. I think that it is solid for what it's trying to do, and definitely captures the feeling of the Alien franchise. So I'd recommend it, and if you're not a D100 person, do the Alien RPG instead. I think you'll
nice.
You'll come out having a very similar experience either way.
Yeah, and I guess I would say too, as a GM, I enjoyed running it. I did it in a very specific way that I probably wouldn't like. It worked for me, and I think that speaks to it as a system, that it was malleable enough for me to basically integrate an entire board game into it. I would say I think it actually does do a really good job at doing a genre piece. I think that it is probably not flexible enough to do something that is very outside that genre. But if you're looking for something to do space horror, I feel like this has some meat on the bones. It's really well supported by the company, and the community seems to really enjoy it too. I would say it's a recommend. But as you can hear, it's mixed. It's not for everybody, and I would support that as well. I think that it is a very specific type of game. And it is sort of in the middle between a hyper crunch and a one-page TTRPG. It kind of is doing something in the middle there. And that's not for everybody either. So, all right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Tabletopped. We try to do these system reviews once per month. I hope you're enjoying them. And I hope that you'll all support us at either our website or the Patreon. At our website, tabletopppod.com, you can go to our Discord. You can find a contact page. There's so much stuff there. Go on, check it out. We also have some of the stuff we've made up there as well. If you go to our Patreon, patreon.com/tabletop, you'll find even more stuff. You can join as a free member and get access to things like the module we just made, The Last Hunting of the Boar. So exciting. Head on over there so you can download and read that. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But there's also a whole nother podcast over there for paid members. There's also some other modules and stuff that we drop there from time to time. So please join us there as well. All right, everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Tabletopped. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.